The bruise on Beatrice Oliver's left cheekbone had faded from purple to a sickly yellow by the time the stagecoach rolled into South Pass City, Wyoming Territory, on a dusty afternoon in June of 1872, and she pressed her gloved fingers against the tender spot, as if she could erase the last terrible memory of Boston along with the mark itself. She had traveled for 3 weeks across the country with nothing but a worn leather satchel, $47 sewn into her petticoat hem, and a newspaper advertisement for a teaching position clutched in her trembling hand. The mountains rose around this rough mining town like guardians, and she prayed they would keep her safe from the man she had fled, the man whose ring she had left behind on the mahogany dresser, along with a brief note that simply read goodbye. The stage lurched to a stop outside a weathered building with a hand-painted sign that declared it the Mountain View Hotel, though the only view Beatrice could discern through the dust-coated window was a row of false-fronted buildings and a muddy street churned by wagon wheels and hoofprints. She waited until the other passengers had disembarked before she gathered her courage and stepped down onto the wooden boardwalk, her traveling dress wrinkled beyond redemption and her dark hair escaping from its pins. "Miss Oliver." A man's voice cut through the noise of the street, and she turned to find herself facing a lanky cowboy with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. He removed his hat, revealing hair that gleamed like wheat in the afternoon light, and offered her a cautious smile. "I am Yates Sumner. The school board sent me to fetch you." Beatrice's first instinct was to step backward, but she fought it down and extended her hand instead. "Mr. Sumner, I appreciate you meeting the stage." His handshake was gentle, and he released her hand quickly as if aware that lingering contact might unsettle her. "My wagon is just down the street. I will get your trunk." "I have no trunk," she said quietly, "only this bag." Something flickered in his expression, concern perhaps, but he simply nodded and gestured toward a wagon hitched nearby. As they walked, Beatrice noticed the way people watched them, the way women whispered behind their hands and men paused in their conversations. She supposed a new schoolteacher was notable in a town like this, particularly a woman traveling alone. "The schoolhouse is about a mile from town," Yates explained as he helped her up onto the wagon seat. His hands on her waist were brief and respectful, but she still tensed at the contact. "There is a small cabin attached where the previous teacher stayed. It is not much, but it is clean and the roof does not leak." "That sounds perfectly adequate," Beatrice replied, folding her hands in her lap as he climbed up beside her and took the reins. They rode in silence for several minutes, the wagon wheels creaking over the rutted road as they left the main part of town behind. The landscape was unlike anything Beatrice had known in Boston, wild and open and beautiful in a way that made her chest ache. Pine trees covered the hillsides, and the air smelled of sage and earth and freedom. "If you do not mind me asking," Yates said carefully, his eyes on the road ahead, "what brings a lady from back east to a rough place like this?" Beatrice had prepared an answer for this inevitable question. "I wanted a fresh start, Mr. Sumner. Sometimes a person needs to leave the past behind and build something new." He glanced at her then, and she saw understanding in his face, as if he recognized the weight of secrets. "Well, this is a good place for fresh starts. Most folks here are running from something or toward something. Nobody judges too harshly." The schoolhouse appeared around a bend in the road, a simple wooden structure with large windows that caught the afternoon light. Beside it stood a smaller cabin, modest but sturdy, with a narrow porch and a stone chimney. Beatrice felt something loosen in her chest at the sight of it. This could be home. This could be safe. Yates brought the wagon to a stop and jumped down, then came around to help her descend. This time she managed not to flinch when his hand steadied her, though her heart still raced. "Let me show you inside," he said, producing a key from his pocket. The cabin was indeed small, consisting of a single room with a bed frame in one corner, a simple table with 2 chairs, a cast iron stove, and shelves along one wall. A door led to what appeared to be a storage closet. But the floors were swept clean, the windows sparkled, and someone had left a jar of wildflowers on the table. "The school board arranged for basic supplies," Yates explained, pointing to the shelves stocked with dry goods. "And I brought over some things from my ranch this morning. Firewood, eggs, butter from our dairy cow. My sister Sarah thought you might appreciate some fresh bread, too." He gestured to a loaf wrapped in cloth beside the flowers. Beatrice felt unexpected tears prick her eyes at these small kindnesses. "Please thank your sister for me. And thank you, Mr. Sumner, for your thoughtfulness." "Just being neighborly," he said, ducking his head as if embarrassed. "My ranch is about 2 miles east of here, the Sumner Ranch. If you need anything at all, you just send word or come by. Sarah would be happy for the female company. She gets tired of just having me and the ranch hands around." "I will remember that," Beatrice promised. Yates lingered by the door, turning his hat in his hands. "School does not start for another week, so that gives you time to settle in. The schoolhouse is unlocked if you want to look around. I will come by tomorrow to check that you have everything you need, if that is acceptable." "That would be kind of you." He nodded and placed his hat back on his head, then paused again. "Miss Oliver, I hope you do not think me forward for saying so, but you seem like someone who has been through something difficult. I just want you to know that you are safe here. I give you my word on that." Beatrice met his steady gaze and saw only sincerity there, no hidden motives or darkness. "Thank you, Mr. Sumner. That means more than you know." After he left, Beatrice stood in the middle of her new home and allowed herself to breathe deeply for what felt like the first time in months. The silence was profound, broken only by birdsong and the whisper of wind through the pines. No shouting, no heavy footsteps on the stairs, no breaking glass or slamming doors. She walked to the window and looked out at the mountains rising in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow despite the summer warmth. She had done it. She had escaped. That first night in the cabin, Beatrice slept fitfully, waking at every small sound, her heart pounding as nightmares of Clarence Whitmore finding her plagued her dreams. But morning came with golden sunlight streaming through the windows, and she rose to make herself coffee on the small stove, marveling at the simple pleasure of brewing it, just the way she liked without anyone criticizing her for wasting grounds or taking too long. She spent the morning exploring the schoolhouse, which was larger than the cabin and filled with rows of simple benches, a teacher's desk at the front, and a blackboard that needed washing. Books lined shelves along the back wall, their spines worn from use. As she examined the primers and readers, the door creaked open and she spun around, her pulse jumping. "I am sorry, I did not mean to startle you." A young woman stood in the doorway, blonde and pretty with a warm smile. "I am Sarah Sumner, Yates's sister. I wanted to welcome you properly and see if you needed anything." Beatrice pressed her hand to her racing heart. "Please come in. Your brother mentioned you. Thank you for the bread. It was delicious." Sarah stepped inside, carrying a basket covered with a checkered cloth. "I brought more supplies. Some preserves, fresh eggs, vegetables from our garden, and I thought you might like some company. It can be lonely out here if you are not used to it." The two women sat on one of the benches and talked while Sarah unpacked her basket. Beatrice learned that Sarah was 22, just 2 years younger than herself, and had come to Wyoming with Yates 5 years earlier after their parents died of fever in Kansas. Yates had worked as a ranch hand for 3 years before saving enough to buy his own land, and now he ran a successful cattle operation with Sarah managing the household and helping with the books. "My brother is a good man," Sarah said, her blue eyes serious. "The best I know. He works too hard and never thinks of himself, always helping neighbors or taking on problems that are not his to solve. But he has been lonely, I think, though he would never admit it." Beatrice felt her cheeks warm. "I am sure there are many women in the territory who would be interested in your brother. He seems very capable and kind." "Oh, there are," Sarah agreed with a laugh. "But Yates is particular. He wants someone real, someone with substance, not just a pretty face or someone looking for security." She paused, then added gently, "He came home yesterday talking about you, said you had sad eyes but a strong spirit. He said that. He notices things, my brother, always has." Sarah reached over and squeezed Beatrice's hand. "I do not mean to make you uncomfortable. I just wanted you to know that you have friends here. Whatever brought you to South Pass City, you do not have to face anything alone anymore." Beatrice felt those threatening tears again and blinked them back. "I was engaged to a man in Boston. He seemed perfect at first, charming and successful. But after the engagement, he changed. Or perhaps he simply stopped hiding who he really was. He became controlling, cruel. He would grab me roughly, say terrible things. The night before I left, he struck me across the face because dinner was not ready when he arrived." She touched her cheekbone unconsciously. "I knew if I married him, I would either spend my life being hurt or I would not survive at all, so I left everything and came here." Sarah's expression was fierce with protectiveness. "You were brave to leave. Many women do not. I was terrified. I am still terrified he will find me." "Then we will make sure you stay safe," Sarah declared. "This territory has its rough edges, but folks look after each other. And Yates, well, he would never let anything happen to you, I can promise you that." True to his word, Yates appeared that afternoon with a wagon full of firewood, which he stacked neatly beside the cabin without being asked. Beatrice watched from the doorway as he worked, noting the easy strength in his movements, the way his shirt stretched across his shoulders. He was handsome in a rugged way that was completely different from Clarence's polished Boston appearance, and there was an honesty in his face that she found deeply appealing. "You did not have to do this," she called out when he paused to wipe sweat from his brow. "Winter comes early up here in the mountains," he replied, walking over to the porch. "Better to have plenty of wood laid by. Besides, it needed splitting anyway, and I find the work relaxing. Would you like some water or coffee?" His smile transformed his face. "Coffee would be wonderful, thank you." They sat on the porch steps together, drinking coffee from chipped mugs as the afternoon shadows lengthened. Yates told her about the students she would be teaching, about 15 children ranging from 6 to 14, the sons and daughters of miners, ranchers, and shopkeepers. He described the rhythm of life in South Pass City, the harsh winters and brief, beautiful summers, the way the community came together for dances and church socials and barn raisings. "It is not Boston," he said with a sidelong glance. "I imagine it seems rough and uncivilized compared to what you are used to." "Boston was not as civilized as you might think," Beatrice replied quietly. "At least not behind closed doors. Here, everything is honest. The land, the people, the challenges. I find that I prefer that." Yates studied her with those perceptive blue eyes. "You are not what I expected when the school board said they had hired a teacher from back east. I thought you would be prim and judgmental, looking down your nose at us frontier folk. And what do you think now?" "I think you are someone who has known darkness and chosen to walk toward the light anyway. I think you are brave, even if you do not feel that way. And I think this place is lucky to have you." Beatrice felt warmth spread through her chest, a feeling she barely recognized as hope. "Thank you, Mr. Sumner. Yates, please, we are not formal out here. Then you must call me Beatrice." "Beatrice," he repeated, and she liked the way her name sounded in his deep voice, careful and respectful. "It suits you." The week before school started passed in a blur of preparation. Beatrice cleaned the schoolhouse thoroughly, organized the books, prepared lesson plans for multiple grade levels. Sarah visited daily, bringing food and supplies but mostly bringing friendship that Beatrice had not realized how desperately she needed. And Yates found excuses to stop by regularly, fixing a loose board on the schoolhouse steps, replacing a cracked window pane in the cabin, bringing fresh meat from a deer he had hunted. "Your brother is very attentive," Beatrice mentioned to Sarah one afternoon as they snapped green beans on the cabin porch. Sarah grinned. "He is smitten. I have not seen him like this since Mary Beth Johnson broke his heart 3 years ago by running off with a gold prospector." "I hope he is not expecting anything from me," Beatrice said carefully. "I am not ready for complications. I came here to start over, not to get entangled with someone new." "Yates is not Clarence," Sarah said gently. "He would never push you or expect anything you are not ready to give. Just let things unfold naturally. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people getting to know each other." But Beatrice found herself thinking about Yates more than she wanted to admit. She noticed how he was always careful not to stand too close, how he asked permission before entering her cabin, how his hands were gentle with the animals and patient with his sister. He made her laugh with stories about ranch mishaps and asked her opinion on books they had both read. Slowly, cautiously, she began to relax around him. The first day of school arrived with clear skies and nervous excitement fluttering in Beatrice's stomach. She wore her best dress, a simple blue cotton that brought out her eyes, and had tamed her dark hair into a neat bun. The students began arriving around 8 in the morning, some walking from town, others dropped off by parents in wagons. They ranged from tiny 6-year-old twins who clung to each other shyly to a lanky 14-year-old boy who seemed skeptical about having a female teacher. Beatrice stood at the front of the classroom and smiled at the sea of curious faces. "Good morning. I am Miss Oliver, your new teacher. I know some of you may be wondering about me, so let me tell you a little about myself. I came from Boston, where I taught at a girls' academy. But I wanted an adventure, so I came west to this beautiful territory. I love reading, mathematics, history, and I believe that education is the key to building whatever future you dream of. Now, why do you not each introduce yourselves and tell me one thing you hope to learn this year?" The day was challenging but rewarding. The younger children were eager and curious, while the older students tested her boundaries carefully. But Beatrice had been trained well and knew how to maintain order without being harsh. By the time she dismissed them at 3 o'clock, she was exhausted but satisfied. She was erasing the blackboard when she heard a knock on the door frame. Yates stood there with his hat in his hands, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "How did it go?" wonderfully. "They are good children. Curious and bright. I am glad." He shifted his weight. "Beatrice, there is a dance in town this Saturday evening, the summer social at the community hall. I was wondering if you would do me the honor of accompanying me." Beatrice's immediate instinct was to refuse, to protect herself from any possibility of vulnerability. But she looked at Yates's hopeful expression and remembered what Sarah had said about letting things unfold naturally. He was not Clarence. He had shown her nothing but kindness and respect. "I would like that," she heard herself say. "Thank you for asking." His smile was brilliant. "I will pick you up at 6 o'clock if that suits you." After he left, Beatrice sat at her desk and pressed her hands to her warm cheeks. What was she doing? She had sworn off men, sworn to focus only on her teaching and her independence. But her heart was racing with something that felt dangerously like anticipation, and she could not quite bring herself to regret accepting his invitation. Saturday arrived too quickly. Beatrice tried on all three of her dresses before settling on a green calico with lace at the collar and cuffs. Sarah appeared in the afternoon with a curling iron and insisted on helping with her hair, styling it into soft waves that framed her face. "You look beautiful," Sarah declared, stepping back to admire her work. "Yates will not be able to form a coherent sentence." "I am nervous," Beatrice admitted. "I have not been to a social gathering since I left Boston. What if people ask questions about my past?" Then you smile and change the subject. "Folks here understand about privacy. Half the people at that dance are running from something or someone. It is the nature of the frontier." Sarah squeezed her shoulders. "Just try to have fun, dance, eat too much cake, laugh at Yates's terrible jokes. Let yourself be young and free for one evening." When Yates arrived, driving a freshly washed wagon with his best horse in the traces, he stopped short at the sight of Beatrice in her green dress. "You look lovely," he said, his voice slightly stunned. "Thank you. You look very handsome yourself." And he did, in a clean white shirt, dark vest and string tie, his wheat-colored hair neatly combed. The ride into town was comfortable, filled with easy conversation about the week's events. Yates told her about a new foal born on his ranch, and Beatrice described the amusing incident of two students bringing the same frog to school and arguing over ownership. By the time they arrived at the community hall, she felt relaxed and genuinely excited for the evening ahead. The hall was crowded with people dressed in their finest clothes, tables laden with food, and a small band tuning instruments in the corner. Yates kept a protective but unobtrusive hand at the small of her back as they navigated through the crowd, introducing her to what seemed like half the population of South Pass City. "Miss Oliver, the new teacher," people said with warm smiles and hearty handshakes. "Welcome to our community." Several women approached to tell her how much their children had enjoyed their first week of school, and several men tried to engage her in conversation, until Yates smoothly steered her away. She noticed he was careful never to act possessive, never to suggest she was his, but he remained close enough that his presence discouraged unwanted attention. When the music started, Yates offered his hand. "Would you do me the honor?" Beatrice hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his. He led her to the dance floor and positioned them properly for a waltz, one hand at her waist, the other holding her hand gently. As they began to move, Beatrice was surprised by his grace. He danced well, guiding her confidently through the steps. "You seem surprised," he said with amusement. "I suppose I thought cowboys only knew how to dance with horses." He laughed, a deep, rich sound that made her smile. "My mother insisted, Sarah, and I learned proper dancing before she passed. Said it was a mark of civilization, no matter where we ended up living." They danced 3 songs before taking a break for refreshments. As Beatrice sipped punch, she watched the crowd and felt something unfamiliar settling over her like a warm blanket. Contentment. She was happy. Actually happy, not just safe or surviving, but genuinely enjoying herself. "You have a beautiful smile," Yates said quietly beside her. "I am glad to see it." "I feel lighter here," she admitted, "like I can finally breathe." "That is how I felt when I came west," he said. "Like I could finally become who I was meant to be instead of who circumstances tried to make me." They talked for over an hour, standing in a quiet corner while the party swirled around them. Yates told her about growing up in Kansas, about watching his parents die and feeling helpless, about the promise he made to take care of Sarah and build a good life for them both. Beatrice found herself sharing more than she intended, about her childhood as the only daughter of a stern professor, about the pressure to make a good match, about how Clarence had seemed like everything she was supposed to want until she realized he was a monster in gentleman's clothing. "I wish I could have protected you from that," Yates said, his jaw tight with suppressed anger. "No woman should ever be treated that way." "I protected myself eventually," Beatrice replied. "That has to count for something. It counts for everything." As the evening wound down, Yates drove her home through the darkness, the wagon lantern casting a small pool of light in the vast night. The stars overhead were more numerous than Beatrice had ever seen in Boston, scattered across the sky like diamond dust. "Thank you for a wonderful evening," she said as they pulled up to her cabin. "I cannot remember the last time I enjoyed myself so much." Yates helped her down from the wagon and walked her to the door. "Beatrice, I want you to know that I am not trying to rush you into anything. I understand you came here to start fresh, and I respect that. But I would very much like to continue spending time with you if you are willing, just as friends with no expectations." She looked up at his earnest face, shadowed in the dim light, and felt her carefully constructed walls crumbling. "I would like that too. You make me feel safe, Yates. That is a gift I did not expect to receive." He smiled and tipped his hat. "Good night, Beatrice. Sweet dreams." As she watched him drive away, Beatrice touched her fingers to her lips and wondered at the strange lightness in her chest. She was falling for him. Despite her determination to remain independent and unattached, she was falling for this kind, strong cowboy who treated her like something precious. The weeks that followed established a comfortable pattern. Beatrice threw herself into teaching, quickly learning each student's strengths and challenges. She stayed late to help struggling readers and advanced students alike, earning respect from parents and affection from the children. Sarah became her closest friend, visiting almost daily and including Beatrice in family dinners at the ranch. And Yates, dear Yates, found reasons to see her regularly without ever pushing for more than she was ready to give. He brought her fresh vegetables from his garden and helped repair things around the cabin that she mentioned needing attention. They took walks in the evening after school, exploring the trails around the schoolhouse and talking about everything and nothing. He lent her books from his surprisingly extensive collection and listened with genuine interest to her opinions on education reform and women's suffrage. Slowly, carefully, Beatrice felt herself healing from the wounds Clarence had inflicted. But happiness, she was learning, could be fragile. It was a Tuesday afternoon in September when the stranger rode into South Pass City. Beatrice was dismissing her students for the day when she saw him through the schoolhouse window, a well-dressed man on a fine horse, stopping to talk to people on the street. Something about his bearing made her uneasy, though she could not say why. She was locking the schoolhouse door when she heard a horse approaching. Looking up, she found herself face to face with the stranger. He was perhaps 40, with a neat mustache and expensive traveling clothes, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Excuse me, miss," he said with exaggerated politeness. "I am looking for someone, and I wonder if you might help me." A woman, dark-haired, educated, probably calling herself a teacher or governess. She would have arrived in the territory sometime in early summer. Beatrice's blood turned to ice, but she kept her expression carefully neutral. "I am afraid I cannot help you, sir. I am new to the area myself and do not know everyone who has passed through. Of course." His smile did not reach his eyes. "The woman I seek belongs to my employer. She left Boston without permission, taking items that did not belong to her." "I see. And what is your employer's name?" "Clarence Whitmore. Perhaps you have heard of the Whitmore family, quite prominent in Boston society." Every instinct screamed at Beatrice to run, but she forced herself to remain calm. "I am afraid not. As I said, I am new here and not familiar with Boston society. Now, if you will excuse me, I have work to do." She tried to step past him, but he moved his horse to block her path. "You seem nervous, miss. Is something troubling you?" "Only that I find it rude when strange men interrogate me on a public road," Beatrice replied with more courage than she felt. "Good day, sir." This time she pushed past before he could stop her, walking quickly toward her cabin with her heart hammering. She did not look back, but she felt his eyes on her the entire way. The moment she was inside with the door barred, she collapsed against it, shaking. Clarence had sent someone to find her. After all these months, after crossing the entire country, she was not safe. She had been a fool to think she could ever truly escape. A knock on the door made her jump, a small cry escaping her throat. "Beatrice, it is Yates. Are you all right? I saw you talking to that stranger, and you looked frightened." Relief flooded through her as she unbarred the door and let him in. He took one look at her pale face and immediately pulled her into his arms, holding her gently as she trembled. "Tell me what happened." Between shaky breaths, she explained about the man, about his questions, about Clarence sending someone to find her. "He knows I came west. He is going to find me. I should have kept running, should have gone to California or Oregon, somewhere farther away." "You are not going anywhere," Yates said firmly, his arms tightening around her. "I will not let anyone hurt you or drag you back to a life you do not want. You cannot protect me from Clarence. He has money, influence, resources. That man is probably just the first. He will send more until someone drags me back to Boston." Yates pulled back enough to look into her eyes, his expression fierce with determination. "Listen to me. You are under my protection now. That means something out here, and if that is not enough, I will marry you. A husband has legal authority over his wife. If you are married to me, Clarence has no claim on you whatsoever." Beatrice stared at him in shock. "You cannot be serious. You would marry me just to protect me from my past." "I would marry you because I have been falling in love with you since the moment you stepped off that stage looking scared but determined to start over," he said quietly. "I would marry you because you make me laugh and challenge my thinking and look at the world with wonder, despite everything you have been through. I would marry you because I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night for the rest of my life. The protection is just a bonus." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Yates, I cannot ask you to do this. It is not fair to you. You are not asking. I am offering. But only if you want this too. I will not trap you in another situation where you feel you have no choice. If you want, I will simply tell that man and anyone else Clarence sends that you are spoken for and under the protection of the Sumner family. But if you are willing, if there is any part of you that feels what I feel, then marry me. Not because you are afraid, but because you want to build a future together." Beatrice searched his face, this good, kind man who had shown her nothing but patience and respect. She thought about the past 3 months, about how happy she had been here, about how safe and valued Yates made her feel. She thought about the future stretching before her, lonely and fearful if she faced it alone, or bright with possibility if she faced it with him. "I love you too," she whispered. "I have been afraid to admit it, even to myself, but I do. I love your kindness and your strength and the way you see the best in people. I love your laugh and your stories and the way you make me feel like I matter. You do matter. You matter more than anything. Then yes, I will marry you, not just for protection, though I am grateful for that, but because I want to be your wife. I want to build a life with you." His kiss was gentle and reverent, tasting of tears and hope and new beginnings. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and smiling, Yates cupped her face in his work-roughened hands. We will do this right. I will talk to the preacher tonight about posting the banns, and we can be married in 3 weeks. 3 weeks feels like a long time when that man is in town asking questions. Then we will be careful. I will make sure you are never alone. I can move into the schoolhouse temporarily to stay close by, and Sarah can come stay with you in the cabin. We will keep you safe until you are legally my wife, and then let Clarence Whitmore try to claim you. He will find out quickly that we handle things differently out here. That night, Yates slept on the floor of the schoolhouse while Sarah stayed in the cabin with Beatrice, and the next morning he rode into town to speak with Reverend Walsh about arranging a wedding. The Reverend, a kindly man in his 50s who ran the small church, was delighted to officiate and agreed to expedite the usual waiting period given the circumstances. I have known Yates Sumner for 5 years, Reverend Walsh told Beatrice when she met with him later that day with Yates at her side. He is one of the finest men I have ever had the privilege to know. You are marrying a good man, Miss Oliver. I know, she said, smiling at Yates. I am very lucky. Word spread quickly through South Pass City that the schoolteacher and Yates Sumner were getting married. The community responded with enthusiastic approval, with women stopping by to offer congratulations and help with wedding preparations. Several people mentioned having seen the stranger asking questions around town, and a protective attitude settled over the community like a shield. We look after our own, more than one person told Beatrice firmly. And you are one of ours now. The stranger stayed in town for 3 more days, asking questions and showing people a daguerreotype of Beatrice that Clarence must have provided. But the residents of South Pass City proved remarkably unhelpful, claiming not to recognize the woman in the picture or offering contradictory information that sent him riding off in wrong directions. Finally, Beatrice was told by the hotel owner the stranger checked out and rode east, apparently convinced that his quarry was not in the area. But Yates remained vigilant, and Beatrice knew she would not truly feel safe until she bore Yates's name. The 2 weeks before the wedding passed in a blur of preparation. Sarah threw herself into planning a celebration, insisting that Beatrice deserved a beautiful wedding despite the rushed timeline. She enlisted help from other women in town to prepare food, decorate the church, and even sew Beatrice a wedding dress from white muslin that they insisted was a gift. Every bride deserves to feel beautiful on her wedding day, Sarah said firmly, when Beatrice protested the expense and effort. Besides, I am finally getting a sister. Let me celebrate that. Beatrice stood for fittings, attended a small party Sarah hosted at the ranch where women she barely knew showered her with practical household gifts, and tried to quiet the persistent voice in her head that whispered she did not deserve this happiness. Yates seemed to sense her occasional doubts and would find quiet moments to reassure her. Having second thoughts, he asked one evening as they walked near the schoolhouse, the September air turning crisp with the promise of autumn. Not about you, she assured him quickly. Never about you. I just worry sometimes that I am bringing danger into your life, that Clarence will not give up, that I am being selfish by accepting your protection. You are not bringing danger. Clarence is the danger, and I would face 100 Clarences to keep you safe and happy. He stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. Beatrice, I need you to understand something. You are not a burden or a problem to be solved. You are the woman I love, the woman I want to spend my life with. Your past does not change that. Your fears do not change that. Nothing changes that. She kissed him then, rising on her toes to press her lips to his, pouring all her gratitude and love and hope into that kiss. When they separated, both of them slightly dizzy, Yates rested his forehead against hers. Just a few more days, he murmured. And then, You will be Beatrice Sumner, and I will be the luckiest man in Wyoming Territory." The morning of the wedding dawned clear and beautiful, the sky a brilliant blue and the aspens beginning to turn gold on the hillsides. Sarah arrived at dawn to help Beatrice prepare, bringing fresh flowers for her hair and a borrowed pearl necklace. "Something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue," Sarah recited as she helped Beatrice into the white dress. "The dress is new, the necklace is borrowed from my mother's things, the flowers have blue forget-me-nots tucked in, and for something old." She paused and pulled out a delicate lace handkerchief. "This was my mother's. She carried it at her wedding, and I want you to have it. You are my sister now, which means you are part of our family and its history." Beatrice clutched the handkerchief and blinked back tears. "Thank you, Sarah, for everything. I came here alone and afraid, and you welcomed me like family from the very beginning." "That is because I knew from the moment Yates came home after meeting you that you were going to be important. He had this look on his face, like he had been wandering in the dark and suddenly found a light." Sarah adjusted Beatrice's veil and stepped back with satisfaction. "There. You are absolutely beautiful. Yates is going to cry when he sees you." The church was packed when they arrived, seemingly the entire population of South Pass City crammed into the pews. Reverend Walsh stood at the front beside Yates, who wore a new suit that had clearly been purchased specifically for this occasion. As Beatrice walked down the aisle on Sarah's arm, since she had no father to give her away, she watched Yates's face transform with emotion. Sarah had been right. His eyes were definitely wet. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to honor and cherish each other, to face whatever challenges came their way together, to build a life based on love and respect and partnership. When Reverend Walsh pronounced them husband and wife, and told Yates he could kiss his bride, the kiss was tender and full of promise. The celebration afterward at the community hall was raucous and joyful. There was music and dancing, more food than Beatrice had seen in one place since leaving Boston, and endless toasts to the happy couple. Beatrice danced until her feet ached, laughed until her cheeks hurt, and felt a happiness so complete it almost frightened her with its intensity. "Tired?" Yates asked late in the evening, finding her sitting out a dance to rest, wonderfully tired. "This has been the most perfect day." "It is not over yet," he said with a slightly nervous smile. "Are you ready to go home, to our home?" They had decided that Beatrice would move to the ranch after the wedding, since it was more defensible and had more space than the tiny cabin. A new teacher would be hired to take over the schoolhouse for the remainder of the year, though Beatrice planned to continue helping however she could. The ranch house was a sturdy two-story structure that Yates had built himself, with a wide porch and windows that caught the morning light. Sarah had moved her things to a smaller room to give the newlyweds the larger bedroom, and had decorated it with candles and more flowers, before discreetly retiring to her own space. Yates carried Beatrice over the threshold, both of them laughing as he nearly dropped her, then set her down carefully in the parlor. The house was quiet and warm, firelight casting dancing shadows on the walls. "Welcome home, Mrs. Sumner," he said softly. "It feels strange being called that. But good strange, like putting on new clothes that fit perfectly even though you have never worn them before." They stood looking at each other for a moment, suddenly awkward now that they were alone and married. Then Yates extended his hand. "Would you like to see the rest of the house? I want to make sure you feel comfortable here, that you know this is your home as much as mine." He showed her the kitchen with its large stove and ample storage, the dining room with a table he had built himself, his small study crammed with books and ledgers, and finally upstairs to the bedrooms. The master bedroom was spacious, with a large bed covered in a beautiful quilt, a wardrobe, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the valley. "I know this is different from what you are used to," Yates said, suddenly uncertain. "It is not fancy like Boston houses." "It is perfect," Beatrice assured him. "It is honest and solid and built with care, like you." He smiled at that and pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist. "I want you to be happy here. If there is anything you want to change or add, just tell me. This is your home now, too." "I am happy, happier than I thought possible." She looked up at him, this man who was now her husband, and felt a surge of love so strong it took her breath away. "Kiss me, Yates." He did, deeply and thoroughly, and the kiss quickly deepened into something more passionate. They made their way to the bed, helping each other out of their wedding finery, laughing softly at stubborn buttons and tangled laces. Yates was gentle and patient, making sure she felt safe and loved. And when they finally came together as husband and wife, Beatrice felt the last of her old wounds begin to heal. Afterward, they lay wrapped in each other's arms, the candles burning low and the night sounds of the ranch drifting through the window. Beatrice traced patterns on Yates's chest and marveled at how right this felt, how perfectly they fit together. "What are you thinking?" Yates asked, his fingers combing through her loose hair. "That I am glad I came to Wyoming, that I am glad I found you, that I never knew love could feel like this, safe and exciting all at once. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me," he promised. "I could never regret this. You saved me, Yates, not just from Clarence, but from a life where I did not know what real love felt like." The weeks that followed the wedding were blissful as they settled into married life. Beatrice threw herself into helping Sarah run the household and learning the rhythms of ranch life. She proved surprisingly adept at keeping accounts, and her education made her invaluable when it came to dealing with suppliers and contracts. Yates often said she had saved him from being cheated more than once by spotting discrepancies he had missed. She also continued teaching, offering lessons to ranch hands who wanted to improve their reading and mathematics, and helping Sarah finish the education she had been forced to abandon when their parents died. The three of them formed a close-knit family unit, working and laughing together, supporting each other through challenges. Winter arrived early that year, with the first significant snowfall coming in early October. Beatrice had never experienced a mountain winter and was unprepared for the intensity of it, the way snow could pile up overnight and trap them at the ranch for days at a time. But she found she did not mind being snowbound with Yates and Sarah. They spent long evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other, playing cards and talking about everything and nothing. It was during one of those snowbound evenings in December that Beatrice realized she had not had her monthly courses in quite some time. She did a quick mental calculation and felt her heart skip. She was almost certainly pregnant. The realization filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She wanted this baby desperately, but the thought of bringing a child into the world while Clarence still potentially posed a threat frightened her. She told Yates that night as they prepared for bed, watching his face carefully for his reaction. He was still for a moment, processing the news, then broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. "A baby! We are going to have a baby!" He swept her into his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "This is the best news, the best possible news. You are not worried about Clarence, about anything?" He set her down gently and placed his hand over her still flat stomach. "I am not going to let fear of what might happen steal the joy of what is happening. We are having a baby, Beatrice, our child. The first of many, I hope. That is cause for celebration, not worry." Sarah was equally thrilled when they told her the next morning, immediately beginning to plan and prepare for the new addition. She pulled out a cradle that had been stored in the barn, the same one that she and Yates had slept in as infants, and began making tiny clothes and blankets. "I am going to be an aunt," she kept saying with wonder. "There is going to be a baby in this house." Winter deepened, and Beatrice's pregnancy became evident. She bloomed with it, her skin glowing and her happiness palpable. Yates was attentive and protective without being overbearing, making sure she did not overwork herself but respecting her need to remain useful and active. It was in February, when the snow was deepest and the world seemed locked in ice, that the second stranger arrived. Beatrice was in the kitchen making bread when she heard dogs barking and looked out to see a man on horseback approaching the ranch. Her blood rang cold as she recognized the deliberate bearing of someone on a mission. She called for Yates, who was in the barn, and he came running at the alarm in her voice. "Stay inside," he ordered, grabbing his rifle from above the door. "Sarah, keep her away from the windows." Through the crack in the door, Beatrice watched Yates stride out to meet the rider. The stranger was different from the first, younger and rougher looking, but he had the same air of determination. "Can I help you?" Yates called out, his rifle held casually but ready. "Looking for a woman," the stranger said. "Beatrice Oliver. Information says she came through here last year, might have stayed. I have been authorized by Clarence Whitmore of Boston to bring her back. There is a reward." "Beatrice Oliver." Yates appeared to consider this. "Name sounds familiar. But there is no one by that name here. I have a picture." The man pulled out a daguerreotype. Yates barely glanced at it. "Never seen her. Now I suggest you get off my property before this storm that is coming entraps you here. It looks like a bad one." The stranger's eyes narrowed. "You are lying. I can see it." "What you can see is me getting impatient. I told you to leave. Do not make me repeat myself." For a tense moment, the two men stared at each other. Then the stranger seemed to notice movement at the other ranch buildings, where Yates's ranch hands had emerged and were standing with weapons visible. He was outnumbered and knew it. "Whitmore will not give up," the stranger said. "He wants her back, says she is his property." "No woman is any man's property," Yates replied, his voice hard as iron. "Now ride out while you still can." After the stranger left, Yates came inside to find Beatrice trembling despite Sarah's comforting arm around her shoulders. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. "He said Clarence will not give up," Beatrice whispered. "He is going to keep sending people until one of them succeeds. Then we need to make it clear that there is nothing to succeed at," Yates said grimly. "I am going to write to Clarence Whitmore myself. I am going to tell him that you are married to me, that you are carrying my child, and that if he or anyone acting on his behalf comes near you again, I will take legal action for harassment. I will also make sure that letter gets published in the Boston newspapers." A man like Whitmore cares about his reputation. The scandal of chasing after a married woman carrying another man's child might be enough to make him back off. "You think it will work?" "I think it has to. Because I am not going to spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders, and neither are you." Yates was as good as his word. He drafted a letter that was both firm and diplomatic, making it clear that Beatrice was legally married and beyond Clarence's reach, and suggesting that any further pursuit would result in public embarrassment for the Whitmore family. He sent copies to Clarence directly and to 3 major Boston newspapers. The response came in April, just as the snow was beginning to melt and Beatrice was entering her final months of pregnancy. A telegram arrived from a Boston lawyer stating that Clarence Whitmore acknowledged Yates's marriage to Beatrice Oliver and would make no further attempts to contact her, provided she returned certain items that belonged to the Whitmore family. Items. Beatrice read the telegram with confusion. I took nothing but my own clothes and a few personal possessions. He is trying to save face, Yates explained. He cannot admit that you simply left him, so he has to claim you stole something. Just write back and say you have no property belonging to him and consider the matter closed. They did exactly that, and heard nothing further. As spring arrived and new life burst forth across the ranch, Beatrice allowed herself to believe that she was truly free, that the past had finally released its hold on her. Their son was born on a warm May morning in 1873, arriving quickly and without complication. Beatrice labored through the night with Sarah and the midwife from town attending her, and Yates pacing anxiously downstairs. When the baby's first cry rang out, strong and healthy, Beatrice heard Yates's shout of joy from below. He burst into the room moments later, his face alight with wonder as the midwife placed the squalling infant in his arms. "A son," he breathed. "We have a son." They named him Jacob Samuel Sumner, Jacob for Yates's father and Samuel for Beatrice's grandfather. He was perfect, with his father's wheat-colored hair and his mother's dark eyes, and Beatrice fell in love with him instantly and completely. "Look what we made," she whispered to Yates as they lay in bed that night, the baby sleeping in his cradle beside them. "Look at this perfect little person who exists because we found each other." "Best thing I ever helped create," Yates agreed, his finger gently stroking Jacob's tiny hand. The next few years passed in a blur of happiness. Jacob grew from infant to toddler, bright and curious and full of energy. The ranch prospered under Yates's management and Beatrice's organizational skills. Sarah met and married a surveyor named Thomas Green, and they built a house on the eastern edge of the Sumner property, close enough to visit easily but far enough for privacy. Beatrice gave birth to a daughter in 1875, a dark-haired beauty they named Caroline Rose. 2 years later came twin boys, Matthew and Michael, who kept the entire household running from the moment they learned to walk. The ranch house that had once seemed spacious was suddenly bursting with children and noise and laughter. Through it all, Beatrice and Yates's love deepened and matured. They had their disagreements, of course, moments of frustration or misunderstanding, but they had built their relationship on a foundation of respect and honesty, and that foundation held firm through whatever challenges arose. One evening in the summer of 1879, when Beatrice was 31 and Yates 33, they sat on the porch watching their 4 children play in the yard. Jacob, now 6, was teaching Caroline and the twins how to identify different birds by their calls. Beatrice leaned against Yates's shoulder and sighed with contentment. "You ever think about Boston?" Yates asked quietly. "Wonder what your life would have been like if you had stayed?" "Sometimes," Beatrice admitted, "but not with longing, only with relief that I escaped. That life would have destroyed me eventually. This life, our life, is everything I never knew I could have. No regrets, not a single one. You gave me something I thought I would never find. Safety, yes, but more than that. You gave me love and partnership and the freedom to be myself. You helped me build a beautiful future from the ashes of my past." Yates kissed her temple softly. "You did the hardest part yourself. You were brave enough to run, brave enough to start over. I just had the good fortune to be here when you arrived. We saved each other, I think." "You were lonely too before I came." "I was," he acknowledged. "I had success and family and a home, but something was missing. I did not even realize what it was until I saw you step off that stage looking terrified and determined all at once. Then I knew. I had been waiting for you." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The children's laughter rang out across the yard, and somewhere a cow lowed, calling her calf. It was the sound of home, of peace, of a life well lived. As the years continued to pass, the Sumner family grew and thrived. Jacob proved to be a natural rancher, spending every possible moment with his father learning to manage cattle and land. He was responsible and hardworking, with his father's steady temperament and his mother's sharp mind. Caroline was artistic and sensitive, filling notebooks with sketches and stories. She reminded Beatrice of herself at that age, curious about the world and hungry for knowledge. The twins were mischievous and inseparable, always getting into some scrape or adventure, but their hearts were good and they adored their older siblings. In 1881, Beatrice gave birth to their fifth and final child, another daughter they named Grace Ann. She was a miracle baby, arriving unexpectedly when Beatrice was 33 and had thought her childbearing years were over. Grace was sweet and gentle, doted on by her older siblings and her parents alike. The ranch expanded as Yates purchased additional land and built up one of the most successful cattle operations in Wyoming Territory. Beatrice managed the business side with skill, negotiating contracts and maintaining accounts with a sharp eye that earned her respect even from men who initially doubted a woman's business acumen. She also became known throughout the region as an advocate for education, working tirelessly to improve schools and ensure that all children, regardless of their family's wealth or circumstances, had access to quality teaching. She opened a small library at the ranch that was available to the community and offered lessons to adults who wanted to learn reading or mathematics. Sarah and Thomas had 3 children of their own, and the two families remained close, their children growing up more like siblings than cousins. Sunday dinners at one house or the other were a cherished tradition, with tables groaning under the weight of food and conversation flowing freely. One afternoon in the spring of 1885, Beatrice was working in her garden when a rider approached. She straightened, shading her eyes against the sun, and felt a moment of the old fear before recognizing the rider as Ben Harris, who ran the post office in town. "Letter for you, Mrs. Sumner," he called, dismounting and handing her an envelope. "Came all the way from Boston." Beatrice's hands trembled slightly as she took the envelope, noting the unfamiliar handwriting and the official-looking seal. She thanked Ben and waited until he had ridden away before opening it. Inside was a letter from a law firm informing her that Clarence Whitmore had died of apoplexy 3 weeks earlier. As she had been briefly engaged to him, they were notifying her as a courtesy, particularly as Mr. Whitmore had made certain provisions in his will concerning her. Beatrice's first emotion was relief so profound she had to sit down on the garden bench. He was dead. The man who had haunted her nightmares for 13 years was dead. She would never have to fear him again. The letter went on to explain that Clarence had never married, and in his will, he had left a written apology to Beatrice for his treatment of her during their engagement. He had also left a sum of $5,000 to be paid to her if she could be located, as recompense for the distress he had caused her. Beatrice read the letter 3 times before Yates found her there, still sitting in the garden with tears streaming down her face. "What is it? What has happened?" He knelt beside her, concern etched in his features. "Clarence is dead," she managed to say, "and he apologized. After all these years, he apologized." She handed him the letter and watched him read it, his expression shifting from concern to relief to surprise. When he finished, he pulled her into his arms. "It is over," he said softly, "truly over." "I do not want his money," Beatrice said firmly. "I want nothing from him, not even an apology. I have everything I need right here." "Then we will donate it," Yates suggested. "Use it to build a proper school in South Pass City, with books and supplies and a salary to attract good teachers. Turn his guilt into something positive. That was exactly what they did. The Whitmore Memorial School opened in 1886, a beautiful building with large windows and modern furnishings, funded by Clarence's guilt and Beatrice's determination to create good from past harm. She never told anyone the true story behind the funding, simply saying it came from an anonymous donor back east. As Wyoming moved toward statehood, Beatrice became involved in the suffrage movement, using her education and speaking skills to advocate for women's rights. In 1889, she traveled to Cheyenne for the Constitutional Convention, one of a group of women pushing for female suffrage to be included in the state constitution. When Wyoming became a state in 1890 with women's suffrage enshrined in its constitution, Beatrice stood in the crowd with tears of joy streaming down her face. "We did it," she told Yates that night. "We gave women a voice." "You did it," he corrected gently. "You and the other brave women who refused to accept less than you deserved." Their children grew and began lives of their own. Jacob took over more of the ranch operations as Yates aged, proving himself a worthy successor. At 23, he married a rancher's daughter named Emma, and they built a house on the northern edge of the Sumner property. Caroline became a teacher, following in her mother's footsteps, and eventually married a doctor and moved to Cheyenne. The twins went into business together, opening a successful mercantile in South Pass City. Grace, the baby, surprised everyone by developing a passion for horses and becoming one of the finest riders in the territory. As Beatrice reached her mid-40s and Yates his late 40s, they found themselves entering a new phase of life. The house that had been full of children's voices was quieter now, though still filled with love. Grandchildren began arriving, and Beatrice discovered that being a grandmother was even more delightful than she had imagined. One evening in the summer of 1895, as they celebrated their 23rd wedding anniversary, Yates took Beatrice's hand and led her out to the porch where they had sat so many times over the years. "You remember the first time I brought you home?" he asked, settling into the rocking chair beside hers. "I remember being terrified and hopeful all at once. I remember thinking your house seemed impossibly large and wondering if I would ever truly feel like it was home. And does it feel like home more than anywhere I have ever been? This ranch, this life we have built together, our children and grandchildren, this is home. You made it home." Yates reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long familiarity. "I have been thinking about that frightened young woman who stepped off the stage 23 years ago. How brave she was to leave everything she knew, how strong to build a new life from nothing. I am so proud of who you became, Beatrice, proud to be your husband. I could not have become this person without you. You gave me the safety to heal, the space to grow, and the love to flourish. You saw me when I could barely see myself." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, watching the mountains turn purple in the fading light. Somewhere in the house behind them, they could hear Grace practicing piano, the notes drifting through the open windows. From the barn came Jacob's voice as he settled the horses for the night. The sounds of family, the sounds of home. "Would you do it again?" Yates asked quietly. "If you could go back to that day in 1872, knowing everything you know now, would you still get on that stage heading west?" Beatrice did not hesitate. "In a heartbeat. Every moment of fear, every challenge we faced, every difficult season, I would do it all again to end up here with you. You helped me build a beautiful future, Yates, more beautiful than I ever dreamed possible." He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "And you gave my life meaning and purpose and joy. I was just a cowboy with a ranch before you came." You made me a husband, a father, a better man than I ever thought I could be." As the stars began to appear overhead, numerous and brilliant in the clear mountain air, Beatrice leaned her head on Yates's shoulder and felt a peace so complete it seemed to radiate from her very bones. She had escaped her past, yes, but more than that, she had created a future beyond her wildest imaginings. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge. They lost Sarah to pneumonia in 1898, a devastating blow that left them all reeling. But they supported Thomas and Sarah's children through their grief, and found comfort in the memories of her kindness and laughter. Yates developed arthritis in his hands and knees as he aged, making ranch work more difficult. But he adapted, focusing more on mentoring Jacob and the younger ranch hands, passing on decades of knowledge and experience. Beatrice's hair turned silver, and reading glasses became a permanent fixture on her nose, but her mind remained sharp, and her passion for education and women's rights never dimmed. They celebrated their 30th anniversary in 1902 with a grand party that brought family and friends from across the state. Looking around at the crowd, Beatrice marveled at how far they had come, how much they had built together. 5 children, 14 grandchildren so far, a thriving ranch, friendships spanning decades. A legacy of love and hard work and determination. In 1905, Yates fell ill with a fever that the doctor could not quite diagnose. For 3 terrifying weeks, Beatrice nursed him through fever and chills, barely sleeping as she kept vigil by his bedside. The children took turns sitting with their father, and the local church held prayer services for his recovery. When the fever finally broke and Yates opened his eyes with clarity, the first thing he said was, "I am not ready to leave you yet." "Good," Beatrice replied, tears streaming down her face, "because I am not ready to let you go." He recovered slowly but fully, and the experience seemed to sharpen his appreciation for every moment. They took to spending more time together, just the two of them, taking slow walks around the ranch, sitting by the fire talking late into the night, stealing kisses like young newlyweds. "I fall in love with you more every day," Yates told her one evening as they watched the sunset from their porch. "Is that even possible, to love someone more after 33 years than you did at the beginning?" "I think real love grows," Beatrice replied. "Like a tree, adding rings with each passing year. We have weathered storms together, celebrated triumphs together, raised children and buried friends together. Every experience added another layer to our love until it became this strong, unshakable thing that defines who we are." In 1910, as Wyoming celebrated 20 years of statehood and Beatrice turned 62, she was invited to speak at a conference in Cheyenne about women's suffrage and education reform. Yates, now 64 and moving more slowly but still strong, accompanied her. Watching her speak to a packed auditorium, her voice clear and passionate as she advocated for women's rights, Yates felt his heart swell with pride. "That is my wife," he told anyone who would listen. "That remarkable woman is my wife." After her speech, as they walked through Cheyenne streets arm in arm, Yates pulled her into a quiet alley and kissed her deeply. "What was that for?" she asked, breathless and laughing. "For being you. For never letting fear hold you back. For building a life that matters. For loving me." "Always," she promised. "I will always love you, Yates Sumner, until my very last breath and beyond." They returned to the ranch to find that Jacob's wife Emma had given birth to their 6th grandchild, a healthy baby girl they had named Beatrice after her grandmother. Holding her tiny namesake, Beatrice reflected on the circle of life, how she had fled to Wyoming as a frightened young woman and now held a grandchild named in her honor. "You are going to be brave and strong," she whispered to baby Beatrice. "You are going to live in a world where women can vote and own property and make their own choices. Your great-aunt Sarah and I and countless other women fought for that. Never take it for granted." The next years brought more grandchildren, the continued prosperity of the ranch, and the deep contentment of a life well lived. Yates and Beatrice settled into their roles as the family patriarch and matriarch, their home the gathering place for holidays and celebrations. They took particular joy in telling their grandchildren stories of the old days, of how Beatrice had arrived on the stage looking scared but determined, how Yates had fallen in love at first sight, how they had built their life together from nothing but love and determination. "It sounds like a fairy tale," one of their granddaughters said wistfully. "Better than a fairy tale," Beatrice replied, "because it was real with all the mess and fear and hard work that real life entails, but also with more joy than any fairy tale could capture." In the spring of 1918, as the nation was consumed by World War and influenza stalked the land, Beatrice fell ill. At 70, her body simply did not have the strength to fight the virus. Yates, now 72, refused to leave her bedside despite the children's concerns about him catching the illness. "I have been beside her for 46 years, he said firmly. "I am not leaving her now." Beatrice drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid and sometimes lost in fever dreams. During her lucid moments, she and Yates talked about their life together, revisiting memories like treasured photographs. "You remember teaching me to dance," she whispered, her voice weak. "You already knew how to dance, love. You just let me lead for the first time. Do you remember the night Jacob was born, how terrified you were? Best night of my life, second only to our wedding. We did well, did we not, with our life together?" Yates could barely speak around the lump in his throat. "We did better than well. We had a love story for the ages." On a warm evening in May, as the sun painted the mountains gold and the sound of birdsong filled the air, Beatrice opened her eyes one last time. Yates held her hand, their children gathered around the bed. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes finding Yates's, "for everything, for giving me a beautiful life." "Thank you," he replied, tears streaming down his weathered face, "for choosing me, for loving me, for being my partner in everything." She smiled, that same brave smile she had worn when stepping off the stage 46 years earlier. "I will find you again," she promised. "In the next life I will find you. And I will be waiting," he vowed. She took one more breath, squeezed his hand gently, and was gone. Yates lived for 3 more years after Beatrice's death. Years he spent mostly in quiet reflection on the porch they had shared for so many evenings. He took comfort in his children and grandchildren, in the legacy they had built together. But the light had gone out of his eyes, and everyone knew he was simply waiting to be reunited with his beloved wife. He passed peacefully in his sleep on a cool autumn night in 1921, and was buried beside Beatrice on a hillside overlooking the ranch they had built together. At the funeral, Jacob read from the letter his father had written to be opened after his death. "I came to Wyoming as a young man seeking fortune and opportunity," the letter read. "I found something far more valuable. I found Beatrice, who came to escape her past and instead built a beautiful future, not just for herself but for our children, our grandchildren, and everyone whose life she touched. She was the bravest person I ever knew, and loving her was the greatest privilege of my life. We built something lasting together, something that will endure long after we are both gone. A family, a legacy, a love that death itself cannot diminish. I am not afraid to die because I know I am going to her, and together we will watch over all of you from whatever comes next." The Sumner Ranch continued under Jacob's management, passed down through the generations. The story of Yates and Beatrice became family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren. The woman who fled her past and the cowboy who helped her build a beautiful future became the foundation upon which an entire family was built. Years later, when the ranch house was being renovated, workers discovered a box hidden in the walls of the master bedroom. Inside were letters Yates and Beatrice had written to each other but never sent, small love notes composed during their years together. The family gathered to read them, and there was not a dry eye as they read words of love and devotion that spanned decades. The final letter was from Beatrice to Yates, dated just weeks before her death. "My darling husband, if you are reading this, then I am gone. But please do not grieve too long. Celebrate instead the incredible life we built together. When I came to Wyoming in 1872, I was running from darkness and pain. You showed me light and love. You gave me safety and freedom and partnership. You gave me children and a home and a purpose. You gave me myself. I was never truly Beatrice until I became Beatrice Sumner. Thank you for every moment, every kiss, every laugh, every challenge we faced together. Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible. Thank you for loving me when I felt unlovable. Thank you for being the kind of man who made me believe in love again. I came to escape my past. You helped me build a beautiful future, and what a future it was. Wait for me, my love, I will find you again. I promise. Forever yours, Beatrice." The great-great-grandchildren who read that letter looked at each other with tears in their eyes, then out the window at the mountains that had witnessed it all. The legacy of Beatrice and Yates lived on, not just in the land and the ranch and the family they had created, but in the story itself. A story of courage and redemption, of a woman who ran from darkness and a cowboy who showed her the light. A story of how love, real and true and lasting, could transform not just two lives but generations to come. A story that proved that sometimes the most beautiful futures are built on the courage to escape the past.